This isn't history. It's reality.
And if you have color in your skin, then you know a little bit what it might be like for those people that are seeking asylum.
Do you think history is repeating itself at Fort Sill?
Absolutely.
Close the camp! Close the camp!
When migrant children are detained at the border, Border Patrol can only hold them for up to 72 hours. Then they head to the Department of Health and Human Services, which places them in detention centers around the country. And these facilities are filling up. That's why HHS announced a plan to house migrant children here at Fort Sill in Lawton, Oklahoma. The children aren't here yet, and HHS says it won't send any children to Fort Sill until it's prepared to safely house and care for them. But to many activists, this is so much more than a military base. To understand that history, I met up with tribal historian Michael Darrow, who took me on a walking tour of this cemetery where Apache prisoners of war were buried. Fort Sill was used to hold Apache POWs from 1894 to 1910.
This area was the homelands of the Kiowas and the Comanches and the Kiowa Apaches, and the United States decided to set up a reservation. In order to make sure that they stayed on this land, Fort Sill was set up to function as a military base, so if anybody caused any trouble for any of the settlers who might be in the vicinity, or they had the military force right here to be able to deal with that.
Do you see any parallels between how the government viewed the Apache people who were held here and how the government views migrants and migrant children who will be held here?
When our people were imprisoned, our tribe was mostly women and children, people who had not fought against the United States, had done nothing criminal, nothing like that. However, there was a popular conception amongst a lot of people in the United States that we were bloodthirsty savages and criminals and murderers, and if we were unleashed on an unsuspecting population, there would be devastation and bloodshed all over the place. That could be seen as a parallel to what's being done here. These are mostly people who are disenfranchised, who don't have any opportunity to defend themselves. They're just trying to find safety somewhere in their lives, just like our people.
No walls, no camps, no bans.
Japanese activists are in agreement. They too say they're protesting the repetition of history. About 120,000 Japanese Americans were held at internment camps during World War II. Fort Sill incarcerated 700 Japanese men in 1942. Some never made it out.
Follow through. If you're not going to be arrested, go ahead and leave.
You're not going to be arrested.
Satsuki Ina was imprisoned at another facility as a child during the war. And now she's one of the activists who hope to be the allies their families never had. Do you think history is repeating itself at Fort Sill?
Absolutely. We were held without due process, removed from our homes based on being people of color, identified as the enemy, although most of us were American citizens. We were incarcerated as children. We suffered family separation. We suffered significant losses that have had a tremendous traumatic impact on our lives forever. We understand that Fort Sill has been a place where multiple groups of people of color have been incarcerated. And now to see another group of people of color being imprisoned there. As Japanese Americans who have been incarcerated, we feel like we have the moral authority to speak up and say that we're not going to allow this to be the repetition of our own history.
The Trump administration is not the first to use Fort Sill to house migrant children. In 2014, the Obama administration held over 1,000 migrant children there. Now, at the time, some Republican lawmakers pushed back. So I called one of them to see how they feel about Fort Sill filling the same role now. You know, I took a trip over to Fort Sill and I spoke with activists there, and there's been a lot of protest about Fort Sill being used for this purpose again. What do you make of this outrage?
I'm a little fascinated by that because I don't remember a single protest during the Obama administration when President Obama used Fort Sill, and we housed 1,000 people that were there at the time. They were extremely well taken care of.
I'm looking back at some of your comments from 2014, and it sounds like you weren't happy that Obama was, in your words, turning to military resources to assist unaccompanied minors arriving from Central America.
No, I was not unhappy with his decision to use Fort Sill. In fact, it's one of the reasons I went to the facility. I would say my criticism was, yes, we absolutely have to do the humanitarian, and they did the humanitarian work extremely well during the Obama administration. So I had no issue with the humanitarian work, but at the same time we're doing the humanitarian work, we've also got to deal with what's driving this. So do you think things will be different if migrant children are housed at Fort Sill again? How do you think things might be different? I would hope they would have the same quality care. I think they're lining up with a lot of the same contractors and a lot of the same individuals. The community will wrap around them. We had all kinds of volunteers that came to be able to help out for those kids. That's a typical Oklahoma standard to be able to reach in. So I can't imagine that we would not do whatever we can to be able to take care of the humanitarian issues and the needs for those kids. So we will continue to do that just as we did in 2014.
Senator Lankford says the military won't be directly involved with migrants at Fort Sill, unlike a facility in Donna, Texas, where active duty troops are walking around, monitoring the well-being of detainees there. But this coalition of activists isn't waiting to see what happens. Michael Topom is a spiritual leader of the Kiowa tribe and one of the many voices from the American Indian movement who say history is repeating itself at Fort Sill.
My grandfather also was in the Army.
That must have been kind of a crazy thing to wrap his head around, actually being based at Fort Sill, where your ancestors were imprisoned, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What would you like to see happen to Fort Sill?
On behalf of the children, I would like to see them treated humanely. They deserve fair treatment. They're not criminals. They're just looking for a better way of life.
And so your focus now is on just making sure that if that is the reality, the people who are held there are treated with humanity and
yes.
compassion and dignity.
Yes,
yeah.
Yes, that's what I would like to see. And I know many in the community feel the exact same way.
Yeah.
These individuals you hear that could be running from death threats, drugs, alcohol, whatever it is, abuse, trafficking, all of that. I know that's the reason why we've all come together here this evening to share and stand together on their behalf.
The Department of Health and Human Services says this place is on standby, preparing to safely house and care for incoming minors should they see an uptick in migrant arrivals this fall. So while the children haven't arrived at Fort Sill yet, a nation will be watching if and when they do.
Hey, NBC News viewers, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.